The story begins with a woman asking her son to introduce himself to someone. Our protagonist's mother introduces him to a girl named Lee Minche, who was a friend's daughter and would be living on the second floor of their house. Annoyed, the nerd says his mother couldn't just bring a girl to live with them, but the woman retorts that the house was hers. Embarrassed, the boy can't even look the girl in the eyes and lowers his head in greeting. Lee extends her hand to greet the boy and introduces herself, also saying it's a pleasure to meet him. The boy extends his hand and, embarrassed, shakes the girl's hand with just a few of his fingers, saying it's nice to meet her, and introduces himself as Kim Jae-hyuk. Jae-hyuk starts explaining about his house, mentioning it has 2 floors. He adds that the second floor was used as storage and the first floor is where he and his mother live, so the old storage room would be Lee's bedroom. The girl asks our protagonist if he attends Yeoman High School, then mentions she's transferring there. With a beautiful smile showcasing her beauty, she says they'll get along well. Kim continues avoiding eye contact, merely confirming, while his thoughts wonder if the girl will indeed transfer to the school. The boy's mother begins to leave and asks her son to help the girl organize her room, and the boy simply agrees. Lee asks the lady to take care on her way to work, and the nerd, noticing the girl's composure, remarks that she's very polite. He continues feeling embarrassed and shy, thinking he really couldn't talk well with girls. Lost in his own thoughts, the girl calls him, and the boy becomes a bit confused. After calling our protagonist, the girl starts rummaging through his pocket, taking out a cigarette, and immediately asks if he has a lighter, making him startled. With a completely different demeanor, the girl asks again if the boy has a lighter or a match at home and calls him an idiot. Noticing the change in the girl's personality, the boy realizes she might be a bully. Lee then walks up to our protagonist and asks why he's not responding. With a disgusted expression, she says the boy can't even look her in the eye or respond. Still acting like the nerd he is, the boy remains embarrassed, trying to avoid looking directly at her. With a mocking smile, the girl laughs at the boy and calls him a loser. Hearing that insult, our protagonist gets irritated, recalling some moments he had endured. Later that day, we can see our protagonist's school in the distance. We see some bullies intimidating him, and one of them thanks the boy for giving him bread. The red-haired bully calls the protagonist a loser, and the others around start laughing at him. He continues to be annoyed, hearing all that while telling himself he's not a loser. The boy remembers the beginning of the semester when this guy introduced himself to him, calling him a friend and treating him nicely. The bully was sitting in front of him, asking our protagonist to go buy some banana milk for him because he was thirsty. However, upon seeing that, Kim is surprised and asks why he should do that and tells the guy to go buy it himself. Suddenly, the bully slaps Kim across the face. Changing his whole personality, the delinquent tells our protagonist to bring it immediately, threatening to kill him if he didn't. Kim is incredulous and shocked, not understanding why he was suddenly attacked. The boy was about to ask his attacker why he did that, but another slap hits his face immediately. The delinquent continues to strike him several times, saying he hit him because the boy answered him incorrectly. While enduring the attacks, Jae-hyuk could only curl up and cry as the bully continues to torment him. We return to the current moment, and Sangbom is complaining because Kim bought red bean bread, which he had already said he didn't like. The boy tries to apologize, saying he forgot, and the bully says it's okay. However, out of nowhere, the delinquent punches the boy hard in the stomach. The bully warms up, saying despite forgiving him for his mistake, he would punish the boy and asks how many punches he wanted to take. While still trying to recover from the intense pain he was feeling, the boy says he wants to take 3 punches. Laughing like a psychopath upon hearing that the boy wants to take 3 punches, the bully calculates and multiplies it by 3, resulting in 9 punches. Then, without mercy, he continues to strike and count the number of attacks he was delivering. One of the bullies in the group warns his friend that the teacher is coming. Sangbom leaves laughing, saying he'll deal with the nerd later. At that moment, all our protagonist could do is cry as he watched the bullies leave, knowing they tormented him every day. The teacher then enters the classroom and asks everyone to sit down. He inquires if any student is absent and informs them that a new student is transferred to their class, gesturing to a girl behind them. The nerd then walks to his seat, and just as he's about to sit down, he looks at the new student. For some reason, he's surprised by something, his eyes widening. We see that the girl is Lee Minche, the new girl who was living on the second floor of his house, and she warmly introduces herself to the class. In a friendly manner, she says it's a pleasure to meet everyone in the class, adding that from now on, she'll get along well with the students. While the other students praise the girl, Kim recognizes her and is in shock. The teacher says they need to find a seat for the girl and looks around for an empty chair. He notices one towards the back just behind Jae-hyuk and asks Lee to sit there. Upon hearing his name, the girl realizes she's heard it somewhere before and looks towards the chair she's about to sit in, realizing what had happened. Lee looks and sees Kim avoiding her gaze, still embarrassed as earlier that morning. She realizes he's the loser nerd who lives on the first floor of the house and gets irritated, asking why the girl had to come to his class. The teacher asks all students to prepare for the start of the class, and the girl takes her seat. Lee sits down, and Kim continues sweating with the girl's presence, wondering why she had to sit right behind him. Kim remembers his mother asking him to take care of her since Lee had just moved from another city, but he couldn't do anything because he's a nerd. However, the boy feels a slight nudge from a foot on his rear, becoming confused. He looks back, asking what was poking him. Kim realizes it was Mincha who did it, once again wearing a mocking expression and holding a piece of paper which she throws at him. Still confused before he could say anything, the paper hits his face, startling him. Jae-hyuk opens the note and upon reading it, realizes the girl had written for him to pretend not to know her. The boy closes the note angrily, thinking that even pretending not to know the girl, he couldn't lie. Some more time passes and it's now time for recess at school. The protagonist is sitting at his desk, writing and drawing something on a piece of paper. Despite not liking the girl, Kim thinks being a transferred student is a bit strange and decides to do something about it. He gets up and starts to leave the room, but leaves a piece of paper on Lee's chair before he goes. Upon seeing the paper, the girl becomes confused and asks what it is, but Kim doesn't respond. She opens the paper and realizes it's a map of the entire school to guide her. Upon seeing that and the boy's gesture, she sighs a bit and stays quiet. In the boys' restroom, we see the bullies bothering Jae-hyuk again, and the red-haired bully asks how many punches he should give, and Kim responds. The bully continues with his cold and psychopathic expression, telling our protagonist to bite hard because he's going to punch his jaw. Kim just closes his eyes and bites his lips, continuing to keep his eyes closed and afraid of the punch, cursing Sangbom in his mind. Sangbom moves to deliver the blow and makes a movement with his body, his hand ready to hit Kim's face. However, just as he's about to strike, he opens his fist and places the palm of his hand on the boy's face, leaving him confused. The bully says he won't hit the protagonist again because he's not that bad. Kim asks himself what was wrong with that guy because he was so crazy. The delinquent approaches our protagonist, saying he had to ask him a favor, and the boy asks what it was. He questions if our protagonist was good at studying, leaving the boy a little confused by the sudden question. A chubby guy who was part of the bully group and looks like a druggie says our protagonist seemed addicted to games. However, Sangbom counters his friend, stating Kim was good at studying because he heard from the class president that he was top of the school. Meanwhile, Kim thinks he's not a genius but used to do well on tests in the past. Sangbom goes up to him and grabs his hand. Without shame on his face, the delinquent asks the boy to help him with the tests. The nerd becomes even more confused, asking what he meant by helping with tests. Again with his psychopathic expression, Sangbom says he's very stupid, telling the boy to make some cheat sheets for him on the test day. Kim starts sweating, questioning if he really wanted to cheat, and in his thoughts, he asserts that if caught, both of them would be in trouble. Another friend of Sangbom asks why suddenly he wanted to do well on tests, and the delinquent replies that he wants to study abroad. He adds that his mother would only allow him to travel abroad if he does well on tests, and he really wants to leave the country. The boy interrupts the conversation with his friend and looks back at our protagonist, grabbing him by the shoulder. With veins popping from his face and an extremely irritated expression, he asks again if Kim will help or not, cursing the nerd. The boy continues sweating without saying anything while thinking that if caught, he'll be screwed too. Not getting a quick response, the bully immediately uses his knee, hitting him hard in the stomach. Kim doesn't understand the sudden attack and can only spit saliva from his mouth. Immediately, he falls to the ground, kneeling while spitting more, trying to recover from the attack. Sangbom gets closer to the boy who was down and says he'll ask one more time. While patting the nerd lightly on the back, he asks again if the boy will help or not. Crying but maintaining a firm expression, the boy simply replies that he will do it. Sangbom smiles, saying the boy made the right decision because it's better for him to go abroad since Kim won't see him anymore. However, the bully looks at Jae-hyuk's face and sees that the boy is extremely angry. Sangbom asks why he's looking like that. The delinquent gets irritated seeing that defiant look and prepares his fist for another punch. He questions why the boy's face still hasn't given up and punches him. With extreme hatred, he begins to punch over and over again the nerd's face, who can only receive the attacks. With his normal expression back, Kim was crying and blood was flowing from his nose. He smiles at his aggressor and apologizes for looking that way. While wiping the blood from his face, Sangbom replies that this way was better. Sangbom and his gang then start to leave the bathroom, and as they leave, the delinquent says he'll count on him for the tests. As the group leaves, they continue to mock the nerd who was just kneeling in the middle of the bathroom. Speechless, the boy can only cry and see the blood running down his nose and face. Assuming an expression of anger again, the boy says he didn't want to be good at studying, but good at fighting, because he wanted to defend himself. And after a long day of classes, the sun begins to set, radiating with an orange light all the clouds. When we see it was already night, and we go back to the protagonist's residence. Inside, Kim's mother was preparing dinner, and beside her was the boy helping. She calls the boy and asks him to go upstairs and call Min-cha. The boy is incredulous and asks why, and the woman replies that they were going to have dinner together. Kim is shocked, thinking it was very strange for him to eat alongside a girl. But the boy's mother convinces him, explaining that they are living in the same house, so it's natural to eat together. He starts climbing the stairs and reluctantly affirms in his thoughts that now that they live together, they won't have anything else to do. When he reaches the second floor, he goes to the girl's room door and knocks on it. Jae-hyuk starts calling the girl's name and realizes there was no response, wondering if she was really there. A soft sound telling him to come in can be heard, and upon hearing that, the boy thinks the girl had allowed him to enter, so he opens the door. But in reality, we see she was just singing along to a song playing on her phone, and the girl had just come out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel. Seeing that the boy had basically invaded her room, the girl curses at him. As a reaction, she grabs a kettle nearby and throws it, hitting the boy's head squarely. With no time for any reaction, the boy can only see the kettle coming at him, and upon impact, he falls to the ground. The object hit the poor boy's head squarely, and he could only lie on the floor unconscious. After a while unconscious, the girl nudges him with her foot. She keeps calling Kim's name, stepping on the poor boy, and finally, Jae-hyuk starts to wake up slowly. We see Minchi already fully dressed, calling our protagonist a loser and telling him to wake up. Realizing the situation, the boy immediately wakes up, standing and asking what had happened. The girl bows and explains that he had been knocked out by the kettle. Again with her mocking expression, Minchi asks if he's some kind of pervert, questioning why he invaded a girl's room without warning. Kim tries to explain, apologizing and saying he thought she had told him to enter, affirming next that his mother had asked him to call Lee for dinner. As he heads towards the door with a threatening aura, the girl warns that if he invades her room again without an invitation, she'll rip his limbs off. With a look of disdain, she calls Kim a disgusting creep. Already seated at the dining table, we see the girl take a spoonful of food into her mouth and then break into a huge smile as if the food were amazing. Lee compliments our protagonist's mother on the incredible food, saying it's delicious, and the woman is extremely grateful. Kim's mother explains that Lee's mother had mentioned she likes soybean paste stew, so she decided to prepare it. Giving a thumbs up to the woman, the girl says this was definitely the best soybean paste stew she had ever eaten and praises the woman as the best. Jae-hyuk, who is also at the table, remains quiet, lost in his thoughts, questioning to himself if the girl is polite with adults or rude only to him. The boy's mother asks why Minchu moved there alone. The girl is a little embarrassed and says it's awkward, but she'll explain. She explains she came there to study, which surprises Kim. Due to the girl's personality, he is completely shocked and impressed and asks if she really came for that. However, seeing the boy's reaction doubting her, Minchi again makes a disgusted expression. Lee explains the main reason was that her grandfather owned a building in the countryside. He had promised to pass it on to any of his grandchildren who attended a university in Seoul. Kim's mother is also surprised to hear this and says her grandfather was very kind. Minchi explains she's using this as motivation to study hard, but that's not the only reason. She informs them that since they live in the countryside, there's no suitable school there, and she's only been into sports since she was young, so studying is something new for her. Because of this set of reasons, the girl had come to Seoul in search of education. Kim's mother is happy to hear this, saying it was a good decision and that the girl could become the owner of a building. Kim Jae-hyuk remains silent, just listening to the situation, and comments that his grandfather giving away a building was impressive, wondering what sport the girl practiced. However, while he was silent, his mother slaps his back, saying he's the perfect person to study well because he's the unique and incomparable top student, Kim Jae-hyuk, who has always excelled academically. Upon hearing that, the girl is astonished and asks if he really is the top student. She points at our protagonist, asking again if the boy is really number one, and he confirms it. Against our protagonist's will, the woman continues speaking, asserting that her son, despite looking dumb, has never lost his place at the top. After analyzing the situation for a while, the girl sees this could be the perfect opportunity to help her. Outside, we see a beautiful full moon night with the sky completely cloudy. While washing the dishes, the woman tells the girl she can go upstairs if she wants. The girl goes to her and bows, thanking her for the meal, and the woman simply says you're welcome. The boy, observing the situation, says he can't figure out the girl's personality. Unexpectedly, Lee walks up to the boy, calling him a loser again, saying she wants to talk to him. We see the beautiful moonlight illuminating all the buildings around the boy's house. Outside, Lee and Kim are descending a large staircase near the boy's house. As they descend, the boy asks how far they are going, and the girl remains silent. Upon reaching the end of a dark alley, the girl crouches down, pulls out another cigarette, and lights it with a lighter. With a happy expression, the girl calls the boy number one and asks him to teach her how to study. Kim is a bit surprised, not expecting to hear that from someone like her. Even reluctant and nervous, the boy simply refuses, surprising the girl. Lee becomes completely irritated and asks why, stating that if she became the owner of the building, she'd give him a share. Even with the tempting offer, he refuses again and turns to head upstairs. He explains that the reason for not helping her is not that, stating seriously that he hates bullies and doesn't want to teach that kind of person to study. Jae-hyuk starts up the stairs to return home, stating he's leaving and telling the girl to finish her cigarette and go home. The girl sees her chance to become the owner of a building slipping away and curses. She tries to convince the boy again, saying she'll introduce him to a girl if he helps. Minchi says she has plenty of hot friends back in her town and continues yelling at the boy. Even so, the boy is determined, thinking to himself that even if they're beautiful, they're probably bullies and rotten inside. However, suddenly the girl mentions a girl who likes his type and claims she has gigantic balloons. He hesitates a bit, realizing it's a tempting offer. But again, he shakes his head in a no, sticking to his principles. Kim tells himself that even though it's a very tempting offer, he can't fall into that temptation. However, a completely different voice speaks up, asking the girl to introduce this friend to him. Kim turns and sees 3 bullies close to the girl, trying to intimidate her. The boy realizes who those people are and remembers that some delinquents usually hang around that neighborhood. The leader of the bully group, a fat guy, starts harassing Lee, calling her hot and saying she doesn't need to introduce any other girl because she'll do. Reaching out to the girl, he asks where she studies, then invites her to go drinking with them. Minche continues with her head down, saying she doesn't want to, and asks them to leave. They keep trying to convince her, and our protagonist, seeing the situation, starts to panic, trying to think of what he can do. Kim looks around but sees everything is empty, and there's no one nearby to help them. The fat guy grabs the girl's hand and asks her not to play hard to get because she likes guys like them, trying to lift her up. Jaehyuk continues in complete desperation, then takes out his phone, trying to call 911 and summon the police. Still with a serious expression, Minche agrees and says she does like guys. Thinking he's gotten the upper hand, the fat guy starts laughing and asks again for the girl to go drinking with them. However, she hadn't finished speaking and stands up, walking over to the man and putting her hands behind his neck. She finishes by saying he's not a man but a filthy pig, then uses her hands to pull his head down and lands a knee right on his chin. Jaehyuk, witnessing the girl's reaction, is completely shocked, wondering what that was. The delinquent, taking the blow, can't do anything but get knocked out. Then, with extreme force and impact from the blow, the guy immediately collapses unconscious on the ground. Kim is impressed by this, asking if the girl really just knocked out a guy of that size with just her knee. The other 2 who were with him get angry, and one of them says he's going to kill the girl and moves towards her. As he curses the girl, he tries to punch her. She gets into a fighting stance, and as he watches, he comments that she looks like a black belt in martial arts. Completely irritated, a delinquent next to the girl throws a punch trying to hit her. But before he can even understand what happened, he's hit with a counterpunch in his nose, causing it to spurt blood. Taking advantage of this opening, the girl lands another punch on his face and chin. After the onslaught of attacks, the delinquent immediately collapses unconscious on the ground too. Our protagonist continues to watch the scene incredulously, unable to believe what's happening right in front of him. The pumped-up delinquent from the group, seeing his friends being taken down, gets furious. With arrogance, he curses at the girl and asks who she thinks she is. As he runs toward her, he boasts about being part of the weightlifting club and being a black belt in Taekwondo. However, when he tries to throw a punch at her, Lee effortlessly dodges his attack. She then executes a spinning elbow strike, landing it right on his jaw. Despite being twice her size, with just one blow, he collapses unconscious. Around the girl were 3 people lying unconscious, but she hadn't uttered a word, as if all of it were normal. Perplexed, Kim wonders what he had just witnessed, noting that the girl had knocked out 3 guys in an instant. Recalling the girl who mentioned at dinner that she played sports, he starts putting the pieces together as he descends the staircase, asking if the sport she mentioned was. Approaching, he calls out to the girl, who is inspecting her own fist. Upon seeing him, she gets irritated, realizing he had been there all along, and states he could have called the police. Even hesitating, he asks what sport she had practiced. Confused, Lee sighs, seeing the boy's expression. She then reveals she practiced martial arts, leaving Kim a bit nervous, swallowing hard. The boy recalls all the bullying he endured from Sangbam and clenches his fists, thinking this could be a unique opportunity. Kim repeats the girl's name and says he'll teach her how to study. Minche is suddenly surprised by his decision, but Jaehyuk adds that in return, she'll teach him how to fight. After our protagonist's statement, silence settles between the 2 young people. However, with a furious and cold expression, the girl says it's impossible. Kim is confused at his offer being refused, as he thought that couldn't happen, and asks why it's impossible. Now with a disgusted expression, the girl gets irritated and asks if the boy knew what teaching martial arts involved. She explains that martial arts involve a lot of physical contact, meaning they would have to be close and smelling each other. Cursing the boy, she says she would never do something like that with him and orders him to go train in a gym. But upon hearing that, the boy informs her he had a reason not to go because all the bullies from school go to gyms all over the city. Adjusting a strand of her hair, Lee says the problem was entirely his, and anyway, she couldn't do that with a loser. Turning to leave, she says she would take care of her own studies, and he should figure out on his own how to fight. Watching her walk away, the protagonist tries to say something but hesitates, thinking he just thought it was a good offer. The 3 bullies who were knocked out start waking up and wondering what they were doing there, and immediately Kim runs home. Then we see that it was later that day, and it was already early in the morning at the boy's house. The boy was still awake even though it was so late, imagining and remembering the fight he had seen earlier. He asserts that even among the strongest bullies at his school, he had never seen anyone fight like that. Then several memories of what happened earlier come to his mind, including all the knockouts the girl inflicted on the other delinquents. Head down, Kim says that if he could learn to fight from someone like her, it would be really amazing. Because if that could happen, he would have a chance against those bullies, and remembers Sangbam tormenting him. The next morning, the boy's mother calls him to wake up. As she leaves, she says she's going to work and asks her son to eat the sandwich she made and give the other one to Minche. With 2 sandwiches in his hand, the boy asks if he really has to deliver the other one to the girl, and his mother asks him to do it for her. Unhappy with the situation, the boy says that having to see that girl early in the morning was a bit intimidating. He starts up the stairs thinking that maybe the young woman might have changed her mind about yesterday. Kim asks himself if he should offer the proposal again and knocks on the girl's door, calling out to her. Chae-jaek realizes once again that the girl wasn't answering and he couldn't enter or she would freak out again. He crouches down, and just as he's about to place the sandwich on the floor, the girl asks him to come in. Reluctantly, Kim opens the door to the room and asks again if he should come in, and the girl answers yes, so the boy goes inside. Upon entering, his vision is blurred by a radiant beauty, and Minchi was only wearing a blouse. Embarrassed, the boy covers his eyes and shouts, thinking he caught the girl in an intimate moment. But she calls him a pervert and lifts her shirt, revealing she had shorts underneath. Still embarrassed by the whole situation, Kim apologizes and extends his hand with a sandwich, saying his mother asked him to deliver it. Lee continues brushing her teeth while messing with her phone and asks the boy to leave the food and go away. Minchi goes to the bathroom, and at that moment, Kim leaves the sandwich near the dresser that was there. But while he's putting away the lunch, the boy shifts his attention, noticing some textbooks next to him. As he recalls that the girl had said she came to Seoul alone to study, he notices something strange about the books. Reading the cover of one of them, Kim realizes they are elementary school textbooks. While snooping through one of the books, Kim refuses to believe the girl was still learning that kind of content and assumes she must have brought some old books. However, upon reading further, the boy notices that the books seem to have been used recently. And upon digging a little more, the boy realizes that all the books there were elementary school level. Kim remembers the moment the girl had mentioned during dinner that she lived in the countryside and didn't have a proper school in her town. The girl finishes brushing her teeth and exits the bathroom, questioning why the boy was still there. With an expression still disbelieving, our protagonist asks the girl if she was really studying with those books. She looks to where the boy was pointing and notices he was showing her study materials. Being extremely proud, Lee is completely embarrassed, avoiding his gaze. And irritated, she walks up to him, pushing him against the wall. Furious, Minchi says she wasn't his friend and it wasn't because he was in her room going through her things. Startled by all this intimidation, the boy simply says okay and apologizes, withdrawing immediately. But before leaving, the boy mentions again what he had talked about yesterday, and he remembers once more the proposal he had made to teach the girl how to study, and in return, she would teach him how to fight. Kim starts to leave the room, saying if the girl changed her mind, she should talk to him. Kim explains that since she didn't even know the basics, no prep course would accept her. This meant it would be extremely difficult for her to study alone, and he adds that if she wanted to study at a university in Seoul, he could be her tutor. But the girl was tired of hearing the boy's voice, and as he leaves, she throws one of the books at the door, telling him to leave immediately. Then some time passes, and after school, we see it's already evening at our protagonist's house. Kim's mother asks again that he take food to the girl, and the boy agrees and goes upstairs. However, the front door of the house suddenly opens. The boy, who had just reached the second floor and was in front of Minchi's room, is interrupted by the girl's voice asking what he was doing there. He was uncomfortable with the situation because he didn't want to bring food to her, but explains he was there because his mother had asked. The irritated girl reluctantly tells him to wait a moment and not leave. She continues up the stairs, and our protagonist looks confused, facing Minchi, who was angry for some reason. Upon reaching the second floor, the girl approaches the boy while asking to talk to him about something important. Setting aside her pride, Lee explains she had applied to 3 prep courses, but was rejected by all because of the placement test. He asks if she was serious and embarrassed. The girl replies again that she was rejected for being at the level of someone in elementary school. Kim affirms he had warned her, recalling when he said no prep course would accept her because she was at a much lower level. Putting aside her pride, Lee says they were going to do it. And with the protagonist asking what she was talking about, she says the boy would teach her to study and she would teach him to fight. A silence hangs in the room as Kim wasn't expecting that suddenly. The protagonist starts reflecting in his thoughts that on the first day they started tutoring each other. In the girl's room, the boy was writing on a blackboard, saying they would start with a basic English lesson. The girl asks why he was being so formal, and the boy replies that as her tutor, he would act that way during the lesson. But as per the girl's request, he informs her he'll speak less formally and proceeds to give her a small test, asking what this meant. The girl thinks the word means cigarettes, leaving our protagonist confused. He continues with a series of English vocabulary questions, and the girl still doesn't answer anything. Kim becomes completely desperate and anxious, realizing the girl really didn't understand anything, and says they would start with the alphabet. The boy begins explaining the basics of how the English alphabet works because her situation was worse than he thought. After a long period of Kim teaching, the girl announces they would switch to martial arts lessons. She goes to her bed and sits cross-legged, explaining that if you know your opponent, you can easily defeat them. So the first thing they should do is gather information about the target. Sitting on the floor, our protagonist asks if gathering information is something done for fighting, and the girl confirms it, saying you can't defeat someone without knowing their weaknesses. Then Minchi informs they would start with that. On another day, we see Minchi on Kim's shoulders as he helps her see over a wall. Irritated, she questions if the boy was sure the delinquent smoked there, and he confirms. Looking around, she notices a group of bullies approaching the spot. Sangbong, with his typical psycho expression, asks one of his friends for a cigarette. Minchi talks to our protagonist, asking if the redhead boy was the one he would fight, and he confirms. One of Sangbong's friends asks if he was really going to fight later and what had happened, and the boy explains that the guy he was going to fight had been bothering him. The big guy asks where the fight would take place, and Sangbong replies it would be after school in the underground parking lot. Seeing it as an opportunity to discover Sangbong's weaknesses, Lee informs our protagonist about the fight and states they would watch. Still confused hearing that, the boy asks the girl to get off him because she was too heavy, and the girl gets irritated. Because she was heavy and moving too much, the two fall to the ground and Minchi lands on our protagonist's back. The bullies hear the thud of the fall and start wondering where it came from while Lee was scolding the boy for dropping her. Amid two tall blue buildings in the city center, a guard post giving access to the underground can be seen. Jae-gyuk was completely hooded, asking the girl why they were going to watch that fight. While smoking, sitting on the staircase leading to the garage, Lee says it's to observe how Sangbong fights. Minchi adds that Kim should just listen quietly to what she was saying and keep his eyes open. Since early in the day carrying the girl's bag, our protagonist questions if he was really learning to fight since he hadn't practiced anything yet. The girl gets annoyed, asking if he doubted her, then says they were on different levels and the boy just agrees. Then several people start arriving at the place with a group of bullies, and Kim informs the girl they had arrived. She gets up from one of the steps of the stairs and tells the boy they should go down. Down in the basement, we see the same group of people around the two boys who would fight. Kim and Minchi were arriving to watch the fight, but a trio of girls recognizes Lee. The girls walk towards Minchi, and their leader realizes Lee was a new student and asks if she came to watch the fight, and Lee replies she was bored. The redhead girl mentions she heard the girl was a troublemaker at her old school and offers a cigarette to Minchi, who declines as she had smoked before. At that moment, Jae-hyuk was closing his coat to avoid being recognized, and the girl asks who that guy was, and Lee replies he was just a classmate. Thoughts were flooding Kim's mind because no one could find out who he was because there's an unwritten rule that losers are not allowed to watch fights. One of the girls from the trio looks back and notices the fight was about to start and alerts everyone. Lee turns to our protagonist and asks him to pay attention to the fight. In the center of the circle of people, we see Sangbong, and in front of him, a black-haired boy who looked like a nerd. They continue staring at each other, and the boy seems to harbor a strong hatred towards the bully. Sangbong, with his psycho demeanor, starts cursing the boy, asking why he was a nuisance. However, the nerd ignores him and tells him to stop talking because he had broken his friend's finger, and Sangbong tries to explain it was an accident during soccer. The nerd asks the bully to apologize, and surprisingly, Sangbong apologizes. However, it's not to the boy's friend but to the boy's eyes. Then Sangbong jams his thumb into his opponent's eye, who groans in pain. He takes advantage of the situation and immediately punches the boy's chin, sending him staggering backward. Sangbong, with all his fury, continues the beating, making the boy step back with each blow. The nerd then tries to retaliate by cursing at the delinquent, but is stopped with a kick to the stomach. Another punch lands on Sangbong's opponent's face, who can do nothing more than collapse onto the ground. Defeated, the boy falls and remains on the ground, unable to muster the strength to get up. As everyone around starts praising the delinquent, he begins mocking his opponent, saying it was all too boring. During the fight, we see our protagonist and his friend observing everything, while Kim remains extremely nervous, saying it was frightening. Even with his opponent practically defeated, Sangbong wasn't satisfied and kicks the boy's head. He continues to kick the boy's face, saying losers shouldn't be arrogant. And after a long session of kicks, the young man, with his face practically disfigured, begins to apologize, saying they should stop there. Up to this point, Kim was completely frightened and nervous, asking how many teeth the boy had lost already. Sangbong squats down, approaching the completely beaten boy, and says that apology was his, so the boy shouldn't apologize as well. The bully says that since the guy got angry just because he broke his friend's finger, he would suffer the same fate, taking hold of the boy's wrist. He adds that he would do something to apologize for the finger, then grabs a fire extinguisher to break the boy's hand fingers. At that moment, our protagonist just couldn't believe the sight he was seeing because it was all too brutal. Later that night, after the whole fight, we see our protagonist with his hand on his head, crying, saying he couldn't win. He and Minchi were sitting on a swing in a park, and the boy continued crying, saying he couldn't win. Desperate from the visions he saw, the boy doesn't stop screaming and saying he couldn't fight. However, the girl gets irritated, kicking the boy and telling him to stop complaining, calling him a loser again. With confidence in her gaze, the girl tells the boy to shut up and asserts that just 1 month would be enough. Not expecting to hear that from her, the boy is completely confused and asks what she was talking about. Minchi gets furious but repeats, affirming that the boy had heard correctly and you would be able to win against the bully in a month. While swinging, she asks if the boy wants to make the deal or not. Still nervous and scared, the boy starts thinking about everything that happened. While wondering if he could really defeat Jung Sangbom, he remembers what the boy did to him. Lee tells Kim to believe in her and that the boy hesitates too much. And in the midst of a beautiful full moon night, they agree to make this deal. But in his mind, the boy still doubts himself, not believing he could win against his opponent. Trembling completely, the boy affirms he wasn't sure even if the girl said it confidently. He was very afraid. And as he clenches his fists, the boy says that those who don't take risks don't win, and anyway, he was already a loser, and if he were defeated, it wouldn't change anything. Changing his stance and with determination, he tells the girl he's in. Then we jump straight to a month after that night they made the deal. In the classroom, students are chatting about exams as usual, and everyone goes about their lives. Sangbom continues tormenting our protagonist, going up to the boy and asking if he had studied because he was counting on him. Behind Kim, Lee watches the whole situation and realizes the young man was still hesitating. She takes the boy to the stairs and confronts him, asking if he was ready because they had already discussed that Kim was going to challenge Sangbom to a fight. But even after a month, the boy says he's still very scared and not sure if he can fight. The girl gets angry, calling him a coward and saying all this preparation was a waste. However, Kim retorts, stating that just thinking about fighting the bully made his mind blank. Seeing her appeals weren't working, the girl calls him an idiot and tells him to just follow because she'll handle everything. They then walk back to their classroom and the teacher arrives announcing she would give the exam and asking everyone to put away their things. The teacher begins, starting the exam and distributing the sheets, also stating cheating wasn't allowed and anyone caught would automatically get a 0. The exam had already been going on for a while, and Minchi starts writing something on a small piece of paper. She starts rolling up the paper and spots Sangbom, who was her target. Quickly, before the teacher could notice, she tosses the paper onto his chair. The small paper lands perfectly on Sangbom's desk, and upon seeing it, he smiles slightly. Sangbom looks to his side, noticing our protagonist, and assumes he threw the paper. He compliments the boy, saying Kim was quick since the exam had only started 5 minutes ago. However, Jae-hyuk, seeing the glance, wonders why the delinquent was looking at him when he hadn't even started the test. Immediately, the bully unfolds the paper, but upon reading it, he notices something that deeply irritates him. Written, there was a curse word accompanied by an invitation to a fight. While the bully was thoroughly irritated reading that, the girl sees that her plan could succeed, and our protagonist has no idea what's happening. After all this situation, we go back a month to the beginning of Kim's preparation. We see the boy carrying Lee on his back as he climbs a long staircase. Unsatisfied with the whole situation, Jae-hyuk asks if that would really help in the fight against his opponent. With her strong personality, the girl taps the boy's head, ordering him to do it and to trust her. Unable to do anything or express himself, the boy simply agrees as they continue up the stairs. Near the top, she continues guiding him where to go while sweating from exhaustion. In another location, we see the boy in a plank position, serving as a seat for the girl, and the boy asks if that would help too. However, to Kim's surprise, Minchi replies no, saying she just wanted to use him as a chair. While the boy struggles to hold her on his back, the girl continues mistreating him and kicking his neck. And after all this training suffering, the two went to eat at a tteokbokki shop. Inside, Minchi said it was for our protagonist to eat since he was paying for the entire lunch. While eating a sausage, the girl explains that strength comes from body weight, so he should eat a lot and somehow gain 10 kilograms. Hearing that, our protagonist gets scared because 10 kilograms was a lot, and he asks how he could achieve that, and the girl says to eat, that he would gain weight. Irritated, the girl says it was already annoying to eat with the loser, and on top of that, she had to endure complaints, and the boy stays silent. After lunch, we see Minchi getting up and starting to leave, asking if he was coming too. After lunch, our protagonist again returns to carrying the girl on his back. The boy asks if she would also teach some fighting techniques or just run away, and she says yes, stating that an order will arrive soon. As they are about to reach Kim's house, the girl notices that her order has arrived and orders the young man to pick it up and take it to the rooftop. Up on the rooftop, we see the order consisted of various training equipment. Never having played sports before, the boy is impressed and asks what those things are, and the girl says it's equipment that will assist in their training. While stretching, Minchi informs that she had asked an old friend from her hometown to send those. Minchi explains that the girl who sent the equipment is that friend with big balloons who had offered herself to the protagonist. He remembers the moment she offered her friend to make him accept the deal. The boy begins to imagine what that girl would be like, feeling embarrassed, but he snaps back to reality and shakes his head, saying it wasn't the time. Lee says they'll start with the basics and teaches how a jab works, punching with her left hand. And then she teaches how a straight right works, punching with her right hand toward our protagonist, creating a gust of wind. She says those were the two basic punches called jab and straight, while our protagonist is impressed. Lee moves her hips and applies a low kick with her right leg, calling it a low kick. Minchi asks Kim to perform a jab, straight, and low kick several times. Finally, she says our protagonist should do that non-stop for 2 weeks because if he didn't want to, he could give up. The boy quickly responds that it was fine, having no problems doing it. The intense training session begins and the boy tries to execute the moves, but the girl notices he's terrible at it and tries to adjust. Seeing the boy was already adapting to the jab and straight, Lee asks Kim to do it while holding 2 weights in his hands, and the boy executes it, feeling immense exhaustion. So it went on for 2 weeks regardless of whether it was day or night. No matter what, he was punching the air. After a long training session, he was executing the punches again, but now without the weights, showing he was much faster at it. Watching, the girl notices he was improving a bit. She gathers some pads, placing them in his hands, and asks him to practice some kicks. For the rest of the day, the training continued with several blows audible on the pads. After a while, finally the end of 2 weeks arrived and our protagonist was in UFC gloves and in a combat stance. He finally executes the sequence the girl had mentioned, performing a jab, straight, and finally a quick kick. Seeing that, the girl congratulates him, saying he was finally getting the hang of it, and for a while, she almost thought of giving up because he was so bad at it. She also says she'll teach an attack called a charge. The protagonist is impressed and asks if that's like a sliding tackle in soccer, but she denies it. Lee explains that a charge is a move to push and knock someone down in a fight, so since he's a novice, just a few punches won't be enough against the bully. Minchi takes a combat stance and asks our protagonist to knock her down. Being a coward, the boy is a little shocked, questioning if he really should knock her down, and Lee replies yes. He judges wrongly, assuming that because he's a man, pushing the girl with all of his might would knock her down. However, upon touching the girl, he feels as if he's crashing into an indestructible stone wall. The young girl, without showing any reaction, asks what the boy is doing since he's so weak. But with his face against the girl's thighs, the boy feels somewhat embarrassed and shy, saying the situation was thrilling. While the boy is distracted in his thoughts, Lee takes advantage and lands a knee to Kim's face. He groans in pain, and the girl explains that if Kim performs the charge wrong, that's what will happen. She points to herself and says now it's her turn to try to knock him down, and the boy just confirms. The two get ready, so after taking an attack position, the girl says she would do it at that exact moment. She also informs Kim that Sangbom was stronger than him, so if he tries a simple charge, he won't be able to knock him down easily. With a smile on her face, she explains she will teach a special charge for the boy to succeed. And before our protagonist could react, he just sees his vision blur and his body falling to the ground. He explains that for the remaining 2 weeks of the month, he underwent even more rigorous training like doing planks with Lee on his back, or quickly climbing stairs while running with the girl on his back, even squatting while carrying Lee in his arms. He also practiced a lot of fighting, throwing punches and kicks with the girl holding pads. Not to mention, the boy also learned charges to knock down his opponent. And finally, he sparred with the girl, fighting in real situations with her and taking beatings several times. In one of these sparrings with the boy's punch, the girl realizes her hand had gotten hurt, and he had improved a lot compared to the first day. Even at sunset, they didn't rest and didn't stop training and fighting for even a minute. Also, our protagonist helped the girl with her studies whenever he could, greatly advancing her. And so, after all this, a month passed, and then we see the school of the boy and the girl. Minchi is asking the boy if he's ready, and even more nervous and sweating cold, the boy says he is. More nervous than ever, Kim asks the girl what she had written in the note because Sangmom was extremely angry. However, Minchi replies it was for the boy to mind his own business, and that it wasn't the time to worry about that. He then changes his expression, showing great focus, so the girl tells him to go. Calling him a loser once again, she asks him to win. Then we see the crowd forming again to watch the fight, and there in front the boy had just arrived. Sangbum's veins were bulging from his face as he smoked a cigarette, trying to calm down. Drawing strength from where he didn't have, the boy becomes confident and says he would do it while facing his opponent. So we go back to the night before the fight, and Minchi was smoking her coconut cigarette as usual. Beside her, Kim was nervous, completely sweaty, and trembling. Noticing the boy's demeanor, the girl asks if he doesn't want to smoke, and the boy replies that he's fine. Lee starts teasing Jae-hyuk, saying he's a loser, and just the thought of a fight makes him tremble, and the boy explains that since it's his first fight, he's a bit nervous. With his head down, the boy says that just thinking about fighting the bully makes him nervous. A little disappointed, the girl says he's a loser and asks him to take off his shirt, surprising the boy. However, without hesitation, he obeys the girl and quickly takes off his shirt, with Lee then asking him to flex his abs a bit. Even though he's quite skinny, he tries to show off some abs due to his training, and Minchi says his body is already looking much better. She says if the boy loses all this training because of foolishness, he would just be an idiot since both of them worked so hard. Minchi adds that he would only lose if he lost psychologically to himself, so she asks him to have confidence. With his head still down and a bit hesitant, Kim agrees with the girl, saying he'll try. While putting his shirt back on, the boy asks why the girl keeps calling him a loser because it's offensive to him. She gets irritated and tells him to shut up because he is a loser, and he should be grateful just for her talking to him. As she lays her head on her knees, she says if he wins, she'll call him by his name. Hearing that, Jae-hyuk swallows nervously but uses it as motivation to boost his confidence. Suddenly, she extends her arm holding a green lighter in her palm, and then asks the boy to take it. The boy is a bit confused by the girl's gift, but she replies that if he holds it in his hands, his punches will become stronger, and he accepts. Kim then takes the lighter from her palm and says he'll return it after winning, but Lee says there's no need, and she wants a new one. Seeing a strange name marked on the lighter, the boy asks where the girl got it, and she says she doesn't need to explain anything to him. Back in the present moment, he gulps nervously while staring at his opponent, holding the lighter tightly in his hand. Even trying to stay confident, the boy continues to be nervous, wondering how those bullies manage to stay calm before a fight. However, he remembers the girl saying to have a little confidence. With that memory in mind, he draws inspiration and tightens his grip on the lighter in his hands, believing he can win. He starts preparing, taking off his glasses and walking towards his opponent, thinking that if he loses the fight, he'll just be a loser again, as he always was. Kim stops walking and stands right in front of his opponent Sangmong, who just stares at him. Sangmong takes the cigarette out of his mouth and starts smiling, saying it's very funny and asks if our protagonist has lost his mind. The boy gets irritated and asserts that he's completely sane while staring at the guy. The delinquent starts laughing loudly while mocking the nerd alongside his friends. Kim admits to himself that he had talked a lot but was still nervous, and Sangmong tries to intimidate him, asking why he suddenly became so brave. The bully asks one of his friends to record because he's going to save that video under the name Ji-hyuk's beating. During this, Minchi is observing the whole situation from the audience, thinking that the loser must win this fight, otherwise he's screwed. Finally, Sangmong decides to fight, flicking his cigarette away, stating that it's going to be very fun. The bully's friends start cheering and praising him to win the fight quickly. The delinquent clenches his fists and asks how many punches our protagonist wants to take because he's going to hit him hard. While his assailant says that, Kim remembers the previous night when the girl explained that fighting was about finding the right moment. She adds that if our protagonist misses the right moment to strike, he can't win, so even if he's scared, he should do his best. The protagonist continues trembling and sweating, drenching his shirt, but for the last time because this was the moment to get revenge. Kim then says the bully should answer first, then asking how many punches he wants. Unexpectedly, our protagonist takes a fighting stance, stating he'll hit the bully 100 times more than he asks for. All the bullies in the area start laughing and mocking the poor nerd. Sangmong also smiles widely, saying the boy is very funny and asks if he's taken something. He seizes the opportunity and quickly starts punching the poor boy, asking where he learned to fight. Seeing the punch coming towards him, our protagonist is taken aback, saying it was just the beginning and he wasn't nervous anymore. And as the punch comes, the boy recalls Lee's teachings, believing he could dodge it. However, before he could retaliate, he's hit squarely in the face, blood streaming before he can react. With a bit of ketchup coming from his nose, the boy realizes his arm was much shorter compared to his opponent's. Instantly, Sangmong lands a cross on the poor boy, asking if he's back to normal after taking a punch. Immediately after, the bully lands another cross with his other hand, asking if the boy knows his place. He continues mocking our protagonist and then delivers a strong knee to the boy's chest. With all those blows, the young man spits saliva as he says it's not right. Using his left hand, the bully grabs Kim by the hair and with his right prepares to strike, saying he'll put the nerd in his place. While holding the boy's head, he continues to punch the boy's face several times. The audience around continues to mock and disbelieve the poor boy, starting to exalt the bully. One of the girls watching mocks our protagonist, saying he's boring and asking why the boy challenged Sangmong. Kim puts his hand at his nose to stem the bleeding, then says it's enough. With one of his hands, he tries to push his assailant away, asking him to stop and saying it's over. The poor nerd was in tears as he continued to plead for the delinquent to stop because he had already given up. The audience notices the nerd crying and continues to laugh and mock the poor boy. The protagonist keeps telling himself he couldn't do it and was very scared, then starts apologizing while Sangmong just stares at him. As an act of pity, the delinquent releases his opponent, saying they would stop there because he already felt sorry. However, surprising everyone, he then kicks Kim hard in the stomach, throwing him against the wall, saying he would never say such a thing. With Kim against the wall, Sangmong moves in and starts punching the boy repeatedly, saying he couldn't stop because it was too much fun. He tries to defend himself by raising his guard, but all he can do is cry. With his face dirty with tears and blood, the boy says that even with all the practice and training with Lee Min-chae, it was no use. He remembers all the times he fought against the girl and asserts that even after all the sparrings with Lee, it wasn't enough. The boy continues taking the blows without reacting, saying he was too scared to fight back. Then he remembers one of the girl's statements asking him if he knows what the most important thing in a fight is. The girl explains that the most important thing to sustain in a fight is mental strength. The young nerd wonders if he heard correctly, and the girl confirms, saying that if a person loses their mental strength, even if they are stronger physically, they will lose the fight. Hearing this, the nerd despairs because his mental strength was terrible, so if he would lose, which would make Minchi angry. She goes up to the boy, putting her finger on his chest and saying he needed to manage his mental strength well because if he broke in the middle of the fight, he would definitely end up being beaten up. With confidence in her eyes, she says she would teach the boy how to escape if that happened. Lee reaches his hands out to the boy, embracing him and saying that if this happened, he should do the same thing she was doing. Having never felt even a feminine touch, the boy becomes completely nervous and shy, seeing the girl clinging to him. Ignoring Kim's reaction, Lee explains that typically you would use a technique, but because he was too weak, she would teach him something else. We return to the current situation where Kim was being beaten with punches to his arms and belly. As he finishes his recollection, he closes his eyes slightly, saying he would do it even if he died, he would try. The boy mimics the girl's actions, embracing Sangbom and throwing himself at him. Seeing the boy's action, Sangbom starts laughing, asking what he was doing, while we see what the next step was. Then, after grabbing the boy, our protagonist bites his ear, tearing off a piece of it. Sangbom, taken aback by the unexpected blow, begins to groan in pain and shout loudly. While Minchu is teaching him this before the fight, the girl says that since it's a fight for life or death, you should focus only on winning. And the second step after that was to sidestep, and our protagonist does so, distancing himself a bit from his aggressor. Sangbom tries to stem the blood gushing from his ear with his hands while glaring at the nerd and cursing. Still crying, our protagonist doesn't lose his angry gaze and then starts running towards the delinquent. He finally throws a punch at the guy who couldn't react because he was worried about his ear injury. And immediately after, without delay, Kim lands a solid straight punch to the bully's face. With the sequence of blows he had just taken, Sangbom can't do anything but be pushed back by the punches. Everyone in the audience starts cheering upon realizing what had happened, and Minchu watches everything with a smile on her face. The young man shouts that they were just getting started and that he was going to beat up the delinquent a lot more while celebrating landing a punch. Despite the blows, Sangbom manages to stay on his feet, and while stemming the ketchup dripping from his nose, he curses our protagonist. Annoying, the bully asks the boy if he really had hit him, while the boy remains silent, thinking that he had. The boy notices that the delinquent was momentarily distracted and thinks he should use that technique. He remembers Minchi explaining that since he was a novice, a few punches wouldn't have an effect and he would need to use charges. The girl adds that Sangbom was bigger and stronger than the boy, so if he opted for simple attacks, he might not be able to defeat him. As she smiles malevolently, the girl states that she will teach the boy a special attack. Taking our protagonist by surprise, the boy can't see anything, only his vision becoming blurry and his body starting to fall. Minchi had advanced and was holding Kim's legs, but the secret of this technique was to shock her shoulder against the male organ of her opponent. Feeling immense pain in his reproductive organ, the boy lets out a scream of agony and despair, spitting saliva. She explains that the secret of this technique was to shock her shoulder with the opponent's groin, and so Lee knocks the boy down. With such a powerful blow and no resistance at all, Kim falls to the ground, with Minchi on top of him. The boy was practically passing out from pain, informing that his whole body was hurting. Lee replies that it was because besides being hit, his body was thrown against the ground. Minchi adjusts her hair, concluding that that's why you don't even notice where the pain came from, and she had used this many times against heavier people. Still trying to regain himself, Kim questions if this kind of move wasn't dirty since it hits a sensitive part of the opponent, and the girl sighs. She gets irritated and yells at the boy, affirming that he wasn't in a martial arts tournament and shouldn't worry about such things because only victory mattered. Minchi also says that in martial arts like Kudo, a kick to the groin is allowed when there's a weight difference, so he should just do as she said. With a somewhat dejected look, the girl also says that the one fighting dirty wasn't the boy, but that delinquent who still bothered him just because he was stronger. Back to the current moment, Sangbom was complaining that besides his ear, his nose was now bleeding ketchup. At that moment, the boy notices that the bully was distracted, and seeing an opportunity, he uses the technique he had learned. As expected, Sangbom groans and screams in pain upon receiving the attack to his groin and panicking. However, before he could react, our protagonist knocks him down, slamming him against the wall, causing the boy to almost faint from the impact. Colliding with the wall also hits his head, and the boy remains practically motionless from the shock. The audience watching this realizes that the bully had hit his head and starts wondering if he hadn't been seriously injured. With his vision completely blurry and almost fainting, all Sangbom could see was the nerd he had tormented assaulting him. Taking out his anger and hatred, our protagonist continues to throw punches at the boy, who was practically unconscious, while cursing him. He doesn't stop, continuing to unleash attacks against his former aggressor, saying that he deserved it. Furious, Kim adds that Sangbom was nobody and therefore had no right to beat up other people. While hitting the bully, the boy continues to cry with anger, saying that he was nobody to try to intimidate him, and if it weren't for him, more tears would be flowing from his face. Then Kim adds that if it hadn't been for Sangbom, he could have had a normal school life. The people watching were completely shocked to see the person they had been rooting for being beaten up by a nerd. However, Minchi, seeing that the boy was losing his cool in his thoughts, asks him to calm down because the fight wasn't over yet. Sangbom finally reacts by putting his foot on our protagonist's belly and kicking him away. The nerd, caught off guard by the attack, suddenly curls up a bit due to the intense pain in his stomach. Taking advantage of the nerd's distraction, Sangbom moves in on him and locks in a guillotine chokehold since it's a jujitsu move. Even completely beaten down, Sangbom continues to curse the kid and asks if he had learned how to fight. Smiling demonically, Sangbom mentions that he had also learned a technique from a friend that was like a guillotine. The delinquent applies more pressure, causing our protagonist to choke more and says he was going to rest. Kim is in trouble and realizes he's about to black out while trying to alleviate the choke by pulling Sangbum's arm with his own hands. However, the bully doesn't give him any leeway and maintains his posture, pressing harder on the hold. The protagonist's eyes are practically rolled back, crying and searching for a way out of this. The boy sees a light in his path, looking at his hand and noticing the lighter Minche had given him to hold in his fist. He sees it as an opportunity. While his aggressor is suffocating him, the boy ignites the lighter on his shoulder, causing it to burn. Feeling the burn suddenly, the bully instantly releases his opponent, stating that it was very hot. Kim recovers, pulling in the air that was lacking from his body, and asserts that the fight wasn't over yet. Using what Minche had taught him to break Sangbum's posture and balance, the boy delivers a massive kick to the back of the bully's thigh. While kicking, the boy also remembers Lee teaching him how to take down an opponent once and for all. The girl says that the best place to hit an enemy is the chin. Lee comments that if you hit the chin with the right weight and balance, no matter the person's size, they will fall and faint. And the girl finishes by saying that whether it's Sangbum or anyone else, just one blow to the chin will be enough to defeat them. In the current moment, the protagonist notices an opening in his enemy's guard, seeing that his chin was exposed. Without any hesitation, the boy aims and immediately punches him there. Pouring out all the rage and hatred he held for months of suffering from the bully, the boy executes the punch. As expected, the blow lands squarely on his opponent's chin, making Sangbum instantly fall backwards. The bully's legs lose balance, and shortly after, the boy passes out, crashing against the ground immediately. All the other people and bullies watching the fight are silent, observing the unexpected turn of events. For a moment, Kim remains silent, trying to breathe and at the same time process everything that had happened. The boy looks at Sangbum, who is unconscious, drooling on the ground, completely knocked out. Some spectators start shouting that the fight was epic, while others still doubt that a loser like him had defeated a bully. The audience continues to cheer and celebrate, while Minche seems somewhat proud, saying it was a tough victory. With a proud and approving smile, she says it was clear he would win because he had a great teacher, then turns and walks away. He is still a bit shocked and perplexed by everything that was happening. He also remembers one last thing Minche had said, that when he won the fight, he should run, and so he does to avoid being ambushed by other bullies. Sangbum's group wonders if they should go after the boy, but one of them suggests they leave him. Without hesitation, the protagonist continues running for his life, fleeing from that place. As he continues running, the boy smiles and cries tears of joy, repeating to himself that he had won. Later, we see our protagonist explaining that the news of his victory over the bully had spread quickly. He thought his days of being a loser who was bullied were over, but he was wrong. We see an unknown person receiving the news that his subordinate had been defeated by a loser. This person who received the news was a chubby bully named Daebong, and the boy says that if he defeated this so-called loser, it would be 2 victories. To not miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and until next time on Tob's Manhwa.